Oh my God, you won't believe what just happened. Trump's latest move has literally shocked the entire nation. And what's even more unbelievable is how the mainstream media is completely silent about it. This could change everything we thought we knew about America's future. If you're worried about where our country is heading, you need to hear this right now. Hey there, freedom fighters and truth seekers. If you're new here, take a quick second to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our eye-opening content. And drop a comment below telling me what you think about Trump's latest actions. Are they ruining America or saving it? Your opinion matters, and I always read the comments to see what you're thinking. Now let's dive into what the media doesn't want you to know about. What's really happening in Washington? I've spent the last 15 years covering politics, and I've never seen anything like what's happening right now. The political landscape has completely transformed, and most Americans have no idea because the mainstream networks are deliberately hiding the truth from you. They don't want you to see how the establishment is desperately trying to maintain control, while everything falls apart around them. What Trump just did has sent shockwaves through the power corridors of D.C. And I've got insider information from sources who are risking everything to get this truth out. The elites are in absolute panic mode, and when you understand why, you'll realize just how much danger our constitutional republic is really in right now. You know, I wasn't always this skeptical of the government and mainstream media. There was a time when I actually believed what I saw on the nightly news and trusted that our elected officials were working for us. But that all changed when I started seeing the contradictions, the convenient omissions, and the outright lies being fed to the American people day after day. What really opened my eyes was watching how they treated outsiders who threatened their power structure. The more I investigated, the more I realized there was an entirely different reality behind the carefully crafted narrative we're all supposed to accept. And what I'm about to share with you today is proof that my suspicions were right all along. The system isn't just broken. It's actively working against average Americans like you and me. Let me tell you something that might shock you. Trump's recent executive actions weren't just political moves, they were direct responses to threats most Americans don't even know exist. My contacts in Washington have confirmed that there's been a coordinated effort to undermine our national sovereignty for decades. And it's accelerated dramatically in recent months. The global elite have been pushing for policies that would effectively erase our borders, crash our economy, and strip away our constitutional rights. And they've been using their control of major news networks to hide their tracks and demonize anyone who stands in their way. What's happening right now is nothing less than a silent war for the future of America. And Trump's latest move just exposed their entire playbook. The thing that really gets me is how blatantly they're lying to our faces. Just last week, I watched 3 major networks completely misrepresent Trump's economic policy announcement. They took his words completely out of context and spun them to sound dangerous and extreme, when in reality, what he proposed would benefit millions of hardworking American families. They edited out key parts of his speech, removed all the supporting data, and then had their experts analyze this distorted version. It's propaganda, plain and simple. And the worst part is that millions of people who don't have time to dig deeper just accept what they're told. This manipulation has created 2 completely different Americas. One where people know what's really happening, and another where people are living in a carefully constructed illusion. I've actually spoken with several former mainstream media producers who left their networks because they couldn't stomach the deception anymore. They described editorial meetings where stories that made certain politicians look bad were killed on the spot, while minor scandals involving their political opponents were blown completely out of proportion. They talked about receiving direct orders from network executives about which narratives to push and which voices to silence. These weren't just suggestions, these were marching orders, and anyone who questioned them found themselves sidelined or fired. One producer told me they were explicitly instructed never to cover certain topics related to election integrity, no matter how newsworthy they might be. This isn't journalism, It's propaganda designed to shape public opinion rather than inform it. What's truly frightening is how sophisticated their methods have become. It's not just about what they report, it's about what they choose not to report. It's about the framing, the language they use, the experts they select, and how they structure their programming to create emotional responses rather than rational understanding. They know exactly which images, words, and presentation styles trigger fear, anger, or distrust. And they deploy these psychological tactics with surgical precision. Notice how they always use unflattering images of certain politicians while presenting others in the most favorable light possible. Or how they use words like claimed when reporting statements from some officials but present others' words as simple facts. These aren't accidents. They're deliberate techniques designed to manipulate your perceptions without you even realizing it's happening. The media's treatment of Elon Musk is perhaps the most obvious example of this bias in action. When he was just a tech entrepreneur focusing on electric cars and space exploration, they celebrated him as a visionary genius. But the moment he started speaking out about free speech and questioning certain political narratives, suddenly he was portrayed as dangerous, unstable, and even a threat to democracy. What changed? Not Musk. What changed was that he stopped playing by their rules. He purchased Twitter, now X, and threatened their monopoly on controlling information. And that's why his recent warnings about the direction of America under the current administration have been either ignored or ridiculed by the same outlets that once hailed him as a technological messiah. They can't refute his arguments, so instead, they attack his character and question his motives. You know what's really telling? The sheer panic that sets in whenever someone with a large platform starts telling truths they don't want heard. Look at how they reacted when Musk started releasing the Twitter files, exposing coordination between government agencies and social media platforms to suppress certain stories and perspectives. Instead of investigating these serious revelations about potential First Amendment violations, the mainstream press either ignored the story completely or dismissed it as a nothing burger without actually addressing the evidence. They deployed an army of fact-checkers who focused on minor details while completely avoiding the central, disturbing claims. Why such an aggressive response if there was nothing to hide? The answer is obvious. Musk's revelations threaten to pull back the curtain on how information control really works in modern America. The thing about Elon Musk that terrifies the establishment isn't just his wealth or his platforms. It's that he's completely outside their system of control. They can't threaten his livelihood. They can't pressure his advertisers. He has multiple successful companies, and they can't intimidate him into silence. He represents exactly what they fear most: an independent voice with the resources and platform to reach millions of Americans directly, bypassing their information gatekeepers entirely. And his warning last month about how Trump's policies are being deliberately misrepresented should send chills down your spine. Musk pointed out that what we're seeing isn't just normal political opposition. It's a coordinated campaign to prevent Americans from understanding what's actually being proposed and why. When someone with access to as much information as Musk sounds the alarm, we should all be paying very close attention. Let me share something that happened to me personally that shows just how far they'll go to control the narrative. Last year, I published a detailed analysis of some questionable financial transactions involving several prominent politicians. My research was solid. I had documentation, sources willing to go on record, and clear evidence of concerning patterns. Within hours of publication, my social media accounts were flooded with attacks. My character was being assassinated online, and I received multiple threats warning me to back off. The piece was flagged by fact-checkers who didn't dispute any specific claims but still labeled it misleading. Payment processors froze my accounts, and platforms throttled my reach. This wasn't just disagreement. It was a coordinated attempt to silence information that powerful people didn't want public. What's happening with Trump right now follows the exact same playbook. His recent policy speech on restoring American energy independence included specific plans that would lower costs for average families, create thousands of jobs, and reduce our dependence on foreign energy sources. These are goals that most Americans, regardless of political affiliation, would generally support. But instead of reporting on the actual content of his proposals, the media focused entirely on out-of-context snippets and reactions from his political opponents. They brought in experts with clear political biases to explain why his plans were somehow dangerous or impossible, without ever giving fair consideration to the substance of what he actually said. This isn't journalism. It's political activism, masquerading as news. And it's depriving Americans of their right to make informed decisions. The question we should all be asking is why? Why go to such extraordinary lengths to distort Trump's message? What is it about his policies that terrifies the establishment so much that they feel the need to create an alternative reality around them? The answer is actually quite simple, though disturbing. Trump's America First policies directly threaten the global power structures that have enriched a small elite at the expense of working Americans for decades. His energy policies would disrupt trillion-dollar markets controlled by international conglomerates. His manufacturing policies would reverse profitable outsourcing arrangements. His border security measures would end the flow of cheap labor that keeps wages artificially depressed. In short, his agenda challenges the very foundations of a system designed to extract wealth from the American middle class and transfer it to a global elite. And that brings us to what just happened last week, the development that has Washington insiders in absolute panic mode, though you won't hear a word about it on the evening news. Trump announced a comprehensive plan to dismantle what he calls the administrative state, the massive, unelected bureaucracy that actually runs most of government operations, regardless of who sits in the White House. These career officials, who face virtually no accountability to voters, have effectively created a shadow government that can slow walk, undermine, or completely block policies they disagree with, even when those policies have been approved by elected officials. Trump's plan would dramatically reduce their power and return control to people who must answer to voters. No wonder they're terrified. Their entire power structure is under threat. The reaction from within these agencies has been swift and revealing. Anonymous sources have been feeding apocalyptic scenarios to friendly reporters, claiming that Trump's plans would destroy vital government functions and endanger Americans. But what they're really concerned about is losing their grip on power. Think about it. If these bureaucrats were truly acting in the public interest and simply implementing the will of elected officials, why would they be so afraid of reforms that increase transparency and accountability? The answer is obvious. Many of them have been using their positions to advance personal or ideological agendas that would never survive public scrutiny. They're not defending good government. They're protecting their ability to govern without oversight or consequences. What makes this situation so dangerous is that these unelected officials have enormous power to regulate nearly every aspect of American life. They determine which businesses succeed or fail through selective enforcement of complex regulations. They control which medical treatments get approved and which get delayed for years. They decide which groups get investigated and which get ignored. And they do all this with minimal oversight and almost no accountability to the people whose lives they're controlling. Trump's plan would change that fundamentally by requiring Senate confirmation for positions that currently face no scrutiny, limiting their ability to create de facto laws through regulations, and making it easier to remove officials who abuse their positions or fail to perform adequately. These reforms would return power to where the Constitution placed it, with elected officials who must answer to the American people. The most telling aspect of this entire situation is the media blackout surrounding Trump's actual policy proposals. Instead of informative discussions about the potential benefits and drawbacks of specific reforms, we get endless articles about polls, campaign strategies, and personality conflicts. This isn't an accident. It's a deliberate strategy to keep Americans focused on political theater rather than substantive issues that might actually affect their votes. When policies are discussed at all, they're presented in the most inflammatory and misleading ways possible, designed to trigger emotional reactions rather than thoughtful consideration. The goal isn't to inform voters, it's to manipulate them through fear, anger, and tribal identity, driving them toward predetermined conclusions without ever engaging their critical thinking. Elon Musk recognized this pattern immediately, which is why his warning last month was so powerful. He pointed out that we're witnessing information warfare against the American public, conducted by institutions they've been taught to trust. Musk specifically highlighted how economic data is being manipulated to create the impression of prosperity while working Americans struggle with historic inflation and diminished purchasing power. He noted that basic definitions are being changed to mask economic realities, like redefining recession, when the traditional definition would acknowledge uncomfortable truths. And he warned that this deliberate distortion of reality extends far beyond economics, affecting how Americans understand crime, immigration, foreign policy, and virtually every other major issue facing the country. His message was clear: you cannot make good decisions based on bad information. What's happening now goes beyond normal political bias. It's a fundamental transformation of journalism from a truth-seeking profession to an activist enterprise dedicated to engineering specific social and political outcomes. Traditional journalistic standards like verification, context, proportionality, and ideological neutrality have been abandoned in favor of narrative construction and emotional manipulation. Stories that support preferred narratives receive extensive coverage regardless of their actual importance, while genuinely significant developments that contradict these narratives are downplayed or ignored completely. Forces are granted anonymity, not because they face genuine danger, but because shielding their identities prevents scrutiny of their credibility or motives. And complex issues are reduced to simplistic moral frameworks, where one side is presented as entirely virtuous and the other as irredeemably evil. The consequences of this transformation extend far beyond politics. They're tearing at the very fabric of American society. When people cannot agree on basic facts, meaningful dialogue becomes impossible. When trust in institutions collapses, social cohesion follows. And when citizens realize they've been systematically misled by authorities they trusted, the resulting anger and disillusionment can fuel dangerous extremism. That's what makes the current situation so volatile. Millions of Americans now believe, with considerable justification, that they're being deliberately manipulated by powerful institutions with private agendas. Whether you think they're right or wrong, the mere existence of this widespread belief represents a profound crisis of legitimacy for our system of government and our information ecosystem. And crises of legitimacy historically lead to periods of significant social instability. Let's talk about what this means for your family's financial future, because this is where these abstract concerns become painfully concrete. The official inflation numbers we're being fed simply don't match the reality most Americans are experiencing at the grocery store, the gas pump, or when paying their rent or mortgage. Real inflation in necessities, like food, energy, and housing is running far higher than the sanitized government figures suggest. And Trump's recent economic proposals directly address these issues in ways that threaten powerful interests. He's calling for energy policies that would dramatically reduce costs across the entire economy, tax reforms that would leave more money in working Americans' pockets, and trade policies that would bring manufacturing jobs back to American communities devastated by globalization. No wonder the financial and media elites are working overtime to distort and discredit his message. The truth is that the current economic system isn't designed to benefit average Americans. It's structured to extract wealth from the productive middle class and funnel it upward to a small group of financial elites through mechanisms like inflation, debt-based currency, tax policies that favor unearned income over wages, and regulations that crush small businesses while protecting corporate giants. This system ensures that working harder rarely translates to getting ahead. Trump's economic nationalism directly challenges this arrangement by prioritizing the interests of American workers over global financial institutions. His policies would redirect the flow of wealth back toward the people who actually produce things of value. That's why the financial establishment is determined to prevent his return to power, and why they're using their media influence to convince Americans to vote against their own economic interests. This brings us to the heart of the matter: what Trump's latest policy announcement really means, and why the media won't tell you about it. Last week, he unveiled a comprehensive plan to restore American energy dominance, not just independence, but dominance. This plan would unleash American energy production across all sources, from traditional fuels to next-generation nuclear and renewable technologies. The economic impact would be enormous. Lower energy costs would reduce prices throughout the economy. From transportation to manufacturing to home heating and cooling, energy-intensive industries would return to American soil, bringing high-paying jobs with them. And America's strategic position would be strengthened, as we would no longer depend on hostile or unstable nations for our energy needs. This plan represents a direct challenge to global energy cartels, environmental ideologues, and foreign governments that benefit from American energy dependence. The response from the media has been revealing. Instead of discussing the potential economic benefits of Trump's energy plan, they've focused almost exclusively on climate concerns, presenting a false choice between economic prosperity and environmental protection. They've amplified the most extreme critics while ignoring energy experts who see potential benefits in the approach. And they've completely failed to address the central question: why should Americans pay skyrocketing energy prices while other nations increase their own production? The reality is that American energy production is among the cleanest and most efficiently regulated in the world. Reducing American production doesn't decrease global energy use. It simply shifts production to nations with lower environmental standards, potentially increasing overall emissions while inflicting economic pain on American families. This nuanced reality doesn't fit the preferred narrative, so it's simply excluded from mainstream coverage. But the energy policy is just one part of a larger economic vision that has Washington insiders truly terrified. Trump is proposing a fundamental restructuring of American trade relationships to prioritize domestic manufacturing and job creation over cheap imports and corporate profits. He's calling for policies that would make it financially advantageous for companies to produce in America rather than outsourcing to countries with lower labor and environmental standards. This approach directly challenges decades of globalist economic orthodoxy that has hollowed out American manufacturing communities while enriching multinational corporations and foreign manufacturers. The establishment's response has been predictable. They've portrayed these policies as economically disastrous, xenophobic, and even dangerous to global stability. But they've studiously avoided addressing the central question: why shouldn't American economic policy prioritize the well-being of American citizens? The financial implications of Trump's economic nationalism explain much of the establishment's panic. The current system of globalized trade, offshoring, and financial engineering has created unprecedented wealth for those positioned to benefit from it. Investment banks, multinational corporations, private equity firms, and the professional class that services them have all prospered enormously. But this prosperity has come at a steep cost to American workers, communities, and long-term economic resilience. Trump's policies threaten to redirect economic benefits away from this influential elite and toward ordinary Americans, a prospect that terrifies those who've built vast fortunes on the current arrangement. That's why we're seeing such coordinated opposition from financial, media, and political establishments that normally maintain at least the pretense of independence from each other. Elon Musk's warning specifically addressed this aspect of the situation. As someone who has built multiple successful manufacturing businesses in America, He understands better than most the regulatory and financial obstacles to domestic production. He pointed out that the current system isn't the result of natural economic evolution. It's the product of specific policies designed to favor certain outcomes and beneficiaries. And he warned that the forces benefiting from this system will use every tool at their disposal, including media manipulation, regulatory harassment, and political obstruction, to prevent meaningful reform. Musk emphasized that what's being portrayed as a defense of economic orthodoxy or global stability is actually a desperate attempt to preserve arrangements that have enormously enriched a small elite while leaving millions of Americans economically vulnerable. His message was clear. Don't be fooled by self-serving arguments, dressed up as expert analysis. The immigration aspect of Trump's policy platform generates perhaps the most intense and dishonest media coverage of all. His position is actually straightforward. America should control who enters the country, prioritize the needs of American citizens and legal immigrants already here, and maintain clear, enforceable standards for those who wish to join our national community. These are principles that most nations throughout the world consider absolutely fundamental to their sovereignty and social cohesion. Yet, when Trump articulates these basic positions, he's portrayed as extreme, xenophobic, and even fascistic. The media deliberately conflates opposition to illegal immigration with opposition to all immigration, attributes the most extreme positions to mainstream enforcement advocates, and presents emotional anecdotes rather than analyzing the complex social, economic, and security implications of immigration policy. The resulting coverage bears almost no relationship to the actual policies being proposed or their likely effects. The dishonesty of this coverage becomes obvious when you consider how immigration is discussed in other contexts. When housing costs skyrocket in areas experiencing population growth, no one questions the relationship between increased demand and higher prices. When schools and hospitals in high immigration areas struggle with overcrowding and resource constraints, local officials openly discuss these challenges. When working-class wages stagnate in industries with high concentrations of unauthorized workers, labor economists acknowledge the impact of labor market competition. Yet when these same issues are raised in the context of national immigration policy, they're dismissed as bigoted or economically illiterate. This double standard reveals that something other than honest analysis is driving mainstream immigration coverage. Specifically, the interests of powerful groups that benefit from the current situation while being insulated from its negative consequences. Behind all of these interconnected issues lies a fundamental question about the nature of American democracy itself. Who should government serve? The establishment view, rarely stated explicitly but clearly evident in policy outcomes, is that government should prioritize global stability, economic efficiency, and the interests of transnational institutions and corporations. The nationalist alternative, which Trump represents, holds that American government should prioritize the well-being of American citizens across all policy areas. This philosophical divide explains much of the establishment's intense opposition to Trump and his policy agenda. It's not just about partisan politics or personal animosity. It's about fundamentally different conceptions of what government is for and who should benefit from its actions. And because the establishment can't win this argument openly, they've resorted to distortion, demonization, and outright censorship to prevent Americans from making an informed choice. This brings us to what might be the most disturbing aspect of the current situation: the increasingly direct involvement of government agencies in controlling public discourse. The Twitter files and subsequent revelations have documented extensive coordination between federal agencies and technology platforms to suppress certain viewpoints and information. This isn't speculative. It's established fact, supported by internal communications, whistleblower testimony, and court records. Government officials have pressured platforms to remove content that contradicted official narratives on issues ranging from COVID policy to election security, often citing misinformation concerns as justification. This direct government involvement in restricting speech represents a clear end run around First Amendment protections, allowing officials to accomplish through pressure on private companies what they cannot legally do directly. And it's been largely ignored by mainstream media outlets that should be fiercely defending free speech principles. The implications of this government-directed censorship extend far beyond partisan politics. When official narratives cannot be questioned without risking suppression, we lose the essential corrective mechanism that has historically prevented serious policy mistakes and abuse of power. Science cannot function without challenge and debate. Democratic governance becomes impossible when citizens lack access to information that might inform their votes. And once established, censorship mechanisms inevitably expand beyond their original justifications, creating ever-widening categories of forbidden speech. That's why Trump's promise to end this practice through executive action has sent shockwaves through Washington power centers. His recent pledge to prohibit federal agencies from labeling protected speech as misinformation or pressuring platforms to restrict content would restore genuine public discourse on matters of vital national importance, a prospect that terrifies those who've benefited from controlling the narrative. Perhaps the most revealing aspect of the establishment's response to Trump's proposed reforms is their complete unwillingness to engage with the substance of his criticisms. Instead of defending the status quo on its merits or acknowledging legitimate concerns, they've relied almost entirely on character assassination, guilt by association, apocalyptic predictions, and procedural objections. They've portrayed perfectly mainstream policy positions as existential threats to democracy. They've attributed sinister motives to proposals that most Americans would consider reasonable if presented fairly. And they've attempted to delegitimize not just Trump himself, but the millions of citizens who find his message compelling. This approach reveals a fundamental contempt for democratic principles and for the intelligence of average Americans. It suggests that the establishment doesn't believe it can win an honest debate on the merits, so it has abandoned persuasion in favor of manipulation and intimidation. Elon Musk's warning specifically highlighted this contempt for ordinary citizens and democratic norms. As someone who has revolutionized multiple industries by challenging established thinking, Musk recognizes the danger of enforced consensus and suppressed dissent. He pointed out that legitimate concerns about election integrity, border security, economic policy, and foreign entanglements are being dismissed as conspiracy theories or disinformation, rather than addressed substantively. And he warned that this systematic dismissal of citizen concerns is creating dangerous levels of alienation and distrust. Musk emphasized that functional democracy requires good faith engagement with differing viewpoints, honest presentation of facts and trade-offs, and respect for citizens' ability to evaluate complex issues. His message was clear. The current approach isn't just dishonest, it's dangerously corrosive to the social trust that democracy requires to function. The uncomfortable truth that neither political establishment wants to acknowledge is that America's current trajectory is unsustainable across multiple dimensions. Economically, we cannot continue borrowing and spending at current levels without eventual currency devaluation or debt crisis. Socially, we cannot maintain cohesion while emphasizing differences over shared identity and values. Strategically, we cannot project power globally while allowing our industrial base and economic fundamentals to erode. And politically, we cannot preserve Republican governance while power increasingly shifts to unaccountable bureaucracies, corporations, and transnational organizations. Trump's appeal lies largely in his willingness to state these uncomfortable truths directly, even when doing so invites intense establishment backlash. And his recent policy announcements address these challenges in ways that threaten entrenched interests benefiting from the current unsustainable arrangements. This brings us full circle to the media blackout on Trump's substantive policy proposals and their potential benefits for average Americans. By denying citizens accurate information about the choices before them, the establishment media is effectively short-circuiting the democratic process itself. They're preventing Americans from evaluating competing visions based on their actual content and likely consequences. Instead, they're substituting emotional manipulation, tribal signaling, and personality-based politics for substantive policy discussion. This approach may serve the interests of media corporations seeking engagement and political establishments seeking to maintain control. But it profoundly disserves American citizens trying to make informed choices about their nation's future. And it creates the dangerous situation we now face, where millions of Americans have simply stopped trusting information from once respected institutions. So, what can you do in the face of this unprecedented information manipulation? First and foremost, diversify your information sources. Don't rely exclusively on mainstream outlets that have repeatedly demonstrated their willingness to distort or suppress important stories. Seek out primary sources whenever possible. Read actual policy proposals rather than media characterizations of them. Watch full speeches rather than edited snippets. Examine data directly rather than accepting predigested analyses. Develop your critical thinking skills by asking who benefits from particular narratives, what information might be missing, and whether emotional appeals are substituting for factual arguments. And most importantly, maintain your intellectual independence. Don't outsource your thinking to self-proclaimed experts or authorities who have repeatedly proven unworthy of your trust. Your ability to make informed decisions depends on breaking free from information ecosystems designed to manipulate rather than inform. The stakes in the current moment couldn't be higher. We're witnessing not just a political contest, but a struggle over the fundamental nature of American governance and society. Will we return to a system that prioritizes the interests of American citizens, values democratic accountability, and respects constitutional limits on government power? Or will we continue the drift toward rule by unelected bureaucrats, transnational organizations, and corporate interests that face minimal democratic accountability? Will we have an information environment that empowers citizens to make informed choices, or one that manipulates them to serve establishment agendas? These questions transcend traditional partisan divides. They speak to the kind of country we will leave to future generations. And your engagement with these issues, your willingness to seek truth regardless of where it leads, will help determine the outcome of this historic struggle. Wow, we've covered a lot of ground today, and I hope this information has helped you understand what's really happening behind the headlines. As always, my goal is to give you the facts and perspectives you won't find in the mainstream media, so you can make your own informed decisions about the future of our country. If you found this valuable, please hit that subscribe button and share this video with friends and family who deserve to know the truth. Remember, knowledge is power, and in these critical times, staying informed is more important than ever. Drop a comment below with your thoughts on Trump's latest moves and how you think they'll affect America's future. I read every comment and love hearing your perspectives. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay free, and keep fighting for the America we all deserve.